Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Cindie Chavez here. It is Wednesday, December the 13th, 2017, and getting started a little bit later than normal. It's 8:05 a.m. Eastern Time. Again, we had some technical things. We had tea things going on, but I think we have them under control. And I have to say, Cindie, I'm hopeful this is actually going to be a very clean podcast from now on for the rest of today, because I'm trying an experiment that when I was trying it offline, it seemed to work well, so maybe we won't have those internet drops.
That'd be fantastic.
I would love that. That would make my life a whole lot happier. So anyway, how's it been the last 24 hours? Any interesting things? Any wins? Any good stuff?
Well, I think that the biggest win I have starts out with a thing that sounds not like a win, but I accidentally yesterday poured boiling water over the top of my hand in the kitchen.
Ooh.
And it really was very, very painful, and I couldn't get to the cold water fast enough. And I decided right then and there, okay, I'm not going to go down this road of like continually telling myself how terrible this is going to be and how much it hurts.
Yeah.
So I just started saying, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. And I put ice on it, but I have to say, within about a half an hour yesterday, the pain was pretty much gone. It doesn't hurt now. There's a tiny spot of redness on it, but I really expected it to blister and be awful. And it's about 95% better than I expected it to be. So it's sort of amazing. That's my win.
That's not a bad win, actually. That's a pretty good win, because when you come through something like that and it's not inducing you to continue to suffer, you're doing really well. I call that a big win.
Well, the thing I've been telling myself, and I tell other people sometimes when we're not feeling well, is that our body's propensity is to heal. When we get a scratch, it immediately starts to heal up. And
yes.
So we can keep reminding ourselves that our body knows how to heal. And that's a much better reminder than, oh my goodness, this is going to be terrible and it's going to make a scar and and it hurts and blah, blah, blah. So I just turned it around to my body knows how to heal. My body heals all the time.
It does. It's actually very good at it. In fact, I'm constantly amazed at all the different ways that the body is able to not only heal, but to heal quickly. And it has a very good track record in that regard, too.
Exactly.
I mean, my sister-in-law, I think I mentioned, is a PhD candidate and does a lot of scientific research. And one of the things that she discovered at one point through her research by reading other people's studies was that they can actually trace what happens in the body from the moment that your brain engages in either happy, positive-related thoughts or negative thoughts in association with an injury or an illness. They can trace it from the point where you experience you're either in a happy state or a sad state. If you're in a positive, happy type state, certain hormones and endocrines and so forth kick off, start sending signals through the nervous system to the injured or ill part of the body and immediately start healing it. They send all kinds of healing agents there. But if you're in a sad state or a depressed state or a very negative state, the opposite happens. Signals go out saying, start dying, start killing, start destroying the host. So, I mean, and the amazing thing is the whole process starts happening in about 90 seconds.
Well, that's amazing. So
Isn't
that
it?
was me cheering my body on. You can do it. You're a good healer. Go ahead.
Well, you were absolutely on the right track by doing that. I mean, that was a really smart thing to do, and I know that's why you're feeling so much better today.
That's great. We got to keep on that for all kinds of things that can come down the road,
Absolutely.
They're always like, I realize it's with the best intentions, but it's like cold and flu season is coming. We get these reminders of
yes.
Right? And it's like, let's just tell the other story. Yeah, my body knows how to heal.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Just as a scientific test, just as a study, to see what happens if you put out a different message to the population. What happens to the incidence of flu during flu season? I bet
it would
you
change.
it would.
I mean, it would change. It would have to.
I think it would. I really do. So, no, this is a good way to start off our daily dose of happy. So thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry that you had the pain and the incident, but I'm glad that you're coming through it in flying colors. That's great.
Yeah, it's really amazing. So what about you? Have you had a win that's something that's other than connected to technology?
Well, actually, right now, everything that I've been focusing on between podcasts has been about technology. And my big win is so far we are, let's see, where are we? We're 5.5 minutes into this, and we haven't had a single internet drop. Every podcast we've done for the last few weeks has had internet drops within the first few minutes. So I'm happy. Like, this is great. This is working.
Yeah, seriously. Okay. So that is a good win because, the frustration of having bad connections and not hearing each other and internet dropping and all that can really be frustrating. So it's like tapping into that feeling of when everything's working perfectly. That is a big win.
It's a huge feeling of relief. And plus, I mean, we want our listeners to have a pleasant listening experience, knowing that they're going to hear clear voices, complete sentences, no breaks. Everything's just going to come through nice. Oh, that is such a nice feeling.
Right?
Yeah, that's my biggest win. Another big win is that, this goes back. This is like a long-winded win. I'll try to tell the short story of it, but last spring, our AC heating unit died, and we live in an apartment complex, so the apartment management, of course, had to fix or replace it. And it was a pretty old unit, so they ended up replacing it. Now, this is a complex that it's like many management companies. They don't tend to want to spend money. They do everything on the cheap. And their tendency has always been to get cheap replacement AC and heating units. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, the guy who's the head of maintenance, he actually lives just 2 doors away from us. He decided to put in something that was better quality. Partly because there were like 6 or 7 units that all had the same thing happen. This is a fairly large complex. And so he could get a bunch of them at a discount. So we said, well, let's get the better quality stuff. Well, I have to say, I'm so pleased he did that because not only is it working so much better than the old, used to work, but our power bill since then has been down like 30% compared to what it was under the old unit. And on top of that, I mean, you know how with, I don't know if you have a heat pump, but with heat pumps, when the temperature gets down to a certain level, it becomes actually too difficult to pull heat out of the outside atmosphere in order to warm the house just because the temperature is so low. There isn't a whole lot of heat to draw in. And so it becomes inefficient. And so what they call the auxiliary heat has to kick in, which is basically just an old-fashioned heating coil. And that basically doubles or triples the amount of electricity you're burning. So you really don't want that to happen too often. And right now we're in a cold snap. Temperatures this morning were like 19 degrees Fahrenheit. And the auxiliary heat under the old system would have been practically running all night. Last night, I don't think it came on at all.
Oh, wow.
Thinking, whoa, this is great.
Really?
So
that's a big win because that's something that affects you the whole season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is like season long. Now, we haven't gone through a winter yet to actually compare the bills to last year. But just what happened on the summer, we were definitely getting a 30% decrease. And if we can get that during the winter, which is when we spend the most money on electricity, whoa, that'll be a really nice savings. That'll be great. So I'm loving it. I'm just loving it.
I would just expect it.
Yeah. Well, I am expecting it. Like, come on, let's go.
Amazing.
So anyway.
It's not quite that cold here, but it was 32 this morning. For us, that's really cold. Yeah,
down in Bayou country, that is very cold. Yeah. And you had snow, you said, like within the last week, which is really unusual.
We did. We had snow on Friday. It shut the whole city down, but it was fun to look out and see it and see all the little snowmen that people were making. Not very big,
Well, you have to have a lot of snow for a big snowman, so that's understandable.
Yeah. We could scoop together some, like balls the size of like grapefruits and
This is where you use all the snow in the yard to make one snowman.
Right? There's none of that, rolling the ball to get it huge. Yeah, no, that doesn't happen here.
They almost need like a rolling pin in order to get it all to smooth just the way you want it to.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
anyway, our topic that we thought of to talk about today was another holiday-related topic. I think I like the idea of doing holiday-related topics during the holidays. And the one that occurred to me is, we'll call it, in one sense, we'll subtitle it the Battle of the Waistline, because the actual title is Body Image During the Holiday Season. And what we're really talking about here is everybody likes to eat sweets during the holiday season, but come January 1st, they say, oh, God, I got to have another resolution. And during the
Right.
season, it can actually impact how you feel about yourself if you're looking in the mirror and you're saying, oh, why am I doing this to myself? So, body image during the holiday season, that's the topic.
I think especially people that are working in places maybe where they're invited to a lot of parties,
Oh, yeah.
or offices where it's routine for people to put out special, food a lot more than usual. Or maybe even, when my kids were little, it seemed like there was um, just a never-ending calendar of going to school and doing like little parties and things, events that were happening. And there was always um, candy and treats
Oh,
at those kind
yes.
of events. And so I guess there's just I don't personally have as much um, of that temptation around me, and I also don't really have a sweet tooth. It just doesn't really appeal to me all that much, and so I don't have that much trouble with it. But I know it's really hard for some other people, especially people. I have a couple of people in my life that really, really love um, things like that,
Hmm.
candy and sweets, and this toffee that comes out at this time of year. That's like we can't keep it around because it just gets wiped out. Anytime we put it out, everyone loves it. And so it's like, yeah, I see that people are, but part of that, don't you think that part of that, I mean, we're here talking about law of attraction.
Right.
How much of that is actually really connected to a story? I always say that our experience in life is directly connected to our identity and how we identify ourselves in different situations. Like I just said, I don't really have a sweet tooth. And I've really sort of told that story my whole life.
Hmm.
And it wasn't intentional. I mean, it wasn't, conscious creation. I'm just going to tell a story that I don't like sweets. It really has been that way. When I was a little girl, my parents used to take me to this place where it was like a breakfast place but they specialized, I can't remember the name of it, but they specialized in like the waffles and pancakes with whipped cream all over them and all this. And I was 5 years old, and I would say that I wanted a pancake, but all I wanted on it was butter. I didn't want syrup and whipped cream, and the waitresses used to just say, is she for real? What 5-year-old kid doesn't want whipped cream all over everything? But I wonder how much of that story has just continued to carry on, so I really don't, it's like I can take it or leave it. And then there's the other part of the story, and that's the part that you were talking about. It's like looking in the mirror, saying, oh, like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm feeling bad about ourselves, having it affect our body image. How much of that effect that we see is a result of the story that we tell? Like, if we think we're doing something really bad for ourselves.
Oh yeah, I agree. I'm sure that it plays a major role. And I'm fascinated by the story you told yourself as a child. It almost makes me wonder how you ended up telling that story in the first place, because it's pretty unusual. Like the waitress was noticing, but that story undoubtedly served you very well growing up and into your adult life. And I am 100% certain that one led to the other, where now you don't have an interest in sweets, and you basically programmed yourself to feel that way. And I think it's also true, like you said, on the other side, people who look in the mirror and don't like what they're seeing there. Again, they're telling themselves a story. I think that's your point is brilliant. I think it's spot on. And I guess part of trying to learn to apply the law of attraction and to what part of what we're doing here with the show of helping people get their daily dose of happy. Well, having a daily dose of happy is a whole lot better than a daily dose of sugar.
Well, and it's one of those things. I mean, I'm a believer in the concept of moderation. I think, okay, everything in moderation. It's like, but I remember someone saying to me one time, "Oh, you have got to try this dessert at this restaurant in town. It is amazing. It's totally worth the stomach ache." And I was like, "No, like, no dessert is worth the stomach ache." Like
What a sales pitch.
So the thing is that it always, everything, right, always goes back to this feeling better. And when that story is already, when we're already hearing this inner voice say, "Oh, you're going to have a stomach ache if you eat that," or you're really not going to feel good if you eat that, and we just ignore it because, yeah, but this thing tastes so good, I really want to eat it anyway. Instead of listening to it, because, our bodies are really smart. And if we listen, if we pay attention, I think we don't want to deprive ourselves. And so we don't want to listen to a voice that's telling us we might not feel good afterwards.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's also another factor, too. This is one I've experienced with my wife, because my wife does have a sweet tooth. And I have... It's not one of those things where I have a need, like I perceive a need to have sweet, but if I do have sweet, I do want to keep eating more of it. So I have that much of a need for it, if you will. And as a result, because my wife will make, some sort of dessert, and she'll say, "Well, you want some too?" And my first reaction is, "Well, yeah, I want to have some. I'm doing this with you. This is one of our things that we do together." And of course, later on, I say to myself, "Why did I do that?" that wasn't smart, and I do this over and over and over again. Now, I actually do not have a major body image problem, probably because I've always been pretty thin, and it's only in the last 10 years or so that I even began to acquire something that I would call a belly that other people would say that's nothing. So, my experience with it is very limited compared to other people, and yet just even having that much doesn't feel good. And so I've been actually pushing back a little bit, saying, "Louise, I really don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want that."
My family, they kid me all the time because, like ice cream, if I'm going to eat ice cream, which is pretty rare, but I will have a scoop that's like the size of a golf ball. And like, that's enough. I'm like, that was so good. And they're all looking at me like, "Oh my goodness, really?" Like,
and I have to say, well, ice cream is something I love. I really do love ice cream. And we do eat ice cream. We'll go out for ice cream like, once a week or something like that, during the summer especially. So I that's a weakness for me, no doubt about it. Have I ever had just one small scoop? Probably, but I don't remember.
It's really all I usually want. But then there are other things that are definitely harder to, to just limit to a really small amount.
Oh, like what?
Well, this is funny because my tendency was to like things that weren't as sweet, but like baked things that weren't like croissants or like bread.
Oh, okay.
And then it turned out that I had, this is an interesting law of attraction kind of question too that I've always wondered about, because it goes back to, I don't eat bread now at all. I don't eat gluten, but I can't tell you that I have a specific like gluten allergy. It's that I'm really sensitive to wheat, and that's generally where the gluten is. So right. It's easy now that people are aware of gluten intolerances, and if you go in a restaurant, you can say, "Do you have a gluten-free menu?" That way I know I'm not eating any wheat.
Yeah.
But I changed my diet maybe 20 years ago and decided to become a vegetarian. And it was purely for health reasons. I just thought that was a healthier option.
Mm-hmm.
So at the same time that I stopped eating a lot of meat, I also stopped eating a lot of junk because I really just cleaned up my diet.
Good for you.
And in hindsight, I realized that was why I got such a boost of health right away. Like, I felt amazing when I first cut out all this junk and stopped eating so much meat. And so then, because I felt so good, I wasn't overweight. I've never really had a weight problem, but I did drop like 5 pounds without trying, and just like gone. I was like, wow, okay, I didn't even try. And so I was so excited, and I felt so good. My energy level was up. I had chronic sinus headaches that suddenly were gone.
Oh.
And I really felt like, 20 years younger or something. It was amazing.
Mm.
Well, that lasted for about 6 months, and during that time, I went from a vegetarian to a vegan. I cut out all animal products, and I did all the things that, the nutritionists tell you should do if you're not going to eat those things. I supplemented, and I made sure to have the right this and the right that. But I started getting sick, and of course, I ended up getting really sick, and all the doctors said, well, it's not your diet because you have the cleanest diet we've ever seen. And it turns out somebody gave me a copy of a book about eating for your blood type. And I know this is a long story, but what happened in a nutshell is that I was under 90 pounds at the time. My hair was falling out. My nails were breaking off. I was in pain all the time, and everybody that loved me thought I was going to die.
Oh, my.
And my friend was at the health food store, and she was talking to the owner who had gone through a serious health crisis years ago, and she said, well, my friend is really sick, and we think she's going to die because no one can tell her what's wrong. They keep saying they don't know what's wrong. And he said, give her this book. And I didn't even know my blood type, and I didn't weigh enough to give blood to find out my blood type, so I had to talk this doctor into please blood type me. And they finally did. They said, you're a type O, and the type O blood type diet says red meat is about the most important thing I can be eating, and that wheat is toxic for people with a type O blood type. And I was just like, I remember to this day, this is like 15, 20 years ago, I remember saying, I did this to myself. Oh, my goodness, I did this to myself, all trying. Now, here's the why I have the confusion, and the little about law of attraction. Because if I have understood, Abraham Hicks correctly, Abraham would say, if you think you're doing something bad for you, then it's definitely going to have an effect of being like something bad for you. But if you think you're doing something good for yourself, I really thought I was doing something good. And because I had such a fantastic response in the first 6 months and I really felt like Superwoman, it was like, okay, this has to be right. And so that has always puzzled me, because when I started eating red meat again and I stopped eating wheat and the things that were on the list of, don't eat these things, I was almost, it feels like a miracle, because within a month I was putting the weight back on. The pain left within 2 or 3 days. And within 3 months to 6 months, I was completely healthy again.
Very interesting. Yeah.
And so for me, that's always been a question when I go back to that. It's like, but, I do have an experience in my life where I was 100% sure that what I was doing was really good for me, and had the experience of just thriving at the beginning of it. And then, no, it wasn't. Well, traffic out my window. Suddenly it wasn't good. So
it's interesting you should say that, because one thing that occurred to me as you're telling that story is something that I thought about before and always kind of put in the back of my mind, like, I'll deal with that later. When you listen to Abraham Hicks, they talk about your emotional set point, and they talk about that in the context of, this is your way of being able to control how you are going to apply the law of attraction in your life, just by constantly being aware of your own feelings. And the thing that occurred to me is, we feel more than just emotions. We also have tactile feelings. And I wondered what role that plays in the whole set point thing. Because we really don't normally think of, touch, the physical feeling of touch, or, feeling physically stuff inside. We don't really think of that as being emotional, as an expression of emotion. But I wonder if it really is. And the reason I say that is, you had this whole set of things that were happening to you that were causing you physical discomfort, but you discounted them as being part of a measurement of your emotional set point, very understandably.
Well, I definitely knew, I mean, obviously that, and I'm kind of making air quotes about the word wrong, right? Because this is such a label, it's such a judgment, but I knew something was wrong. I mean, I knew I was feeling something I didn't want to feel. Nobody wants to be sick.
Right.
And yet, and of course for me, I really, and still to this day, believe that food is probably our most important medicine.
Yep.
And so at the time, you know, the changing my diet helped me feel better. And so it made sense. But the nutritionists that I had gone to and the doctors were saying, well, I remember one time they made me write down everything I ate for a week. Everything. They said if you have one bite of something, it has to go down on the list. I said, okay. And so I did it. And they said, oh, well, this is not diet related. So, you know, it was my long quest to get better. Now, in hindsight, it really would be interesting, like what kind of positivity or what kind of thoughts was I having at the time when suddenly the answer appeared, right? Suddenly the book appeared to me. I mean, someone brought it to me.
Yeah.
So there's no way of knowing now because it was so many years ago.
And you don't
I've
have any
always been a
recollection, I
person.
presume.
Yeah, I've always been a person that's been a positive thinker, so to speak, an optimist.
Yeah.
And so who knows, you know, but it is interesting. You were talking about feelings and tactile things. This is something that I make a distinction between in my own teaching is that we have feelings and we have emotions. And emotions are, you know, sad, mad, happy, scared. Those are the four main ones. But, of course, there's hundreds of emotion words we can use. But then we also have feelings. I have a knot in my stomach, or my neck feels stiff, or my shoulders are tight. I mean, those are feelings that we feel in our body, and we might not. There's definitely a connection.
Sure.
Between those feelings and emotions, and I think that our body definitely speaks to us with both of those things.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess I was thinking just in terms of the Abraham teachings, and do we include that when we are considering what our emotional set points are? And I'm beginning to think that we do. If we don't, we're actually cutting out a piece of the signals that we're getting, I think.
I agree. I'm with you on that one, totally. I agree. I think we have to listen to our bodies. They are telling us a message. And sometimes those feelings are intertwined with the emotions.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well,
probably most of the time, right?
I would say perhaps all the time.
Yeah, they are. So paying attention to those signals gives us even more. It's all just, everything is just energy and information.
Yeah, it really, truly is.
Just it gives amazing. Us even more.
By the way, if there are any listeners who are listening live while we're doing this broadcast, it's currently Wednesday, December 13th. We're 8:30 a.m., 8:33 a.m. Eastern Time. We know almost all of our listeners listen as a recorded podcast after the fact, either on PRN or on the website podcast subscriptions. But if you are listening live, and we're trying to encourage more and more people to listen live, and you want to participate, we'd love to hear you. You know, give us a call. We do have an open phone line that you can call. That number is 860-264-5432. That's 860-264-5432. And we don't really necessarily expect anyone to call in because we do know the numbers. The numbers are like 99.9% listening after the fact. But hey, if you're listening, we'd love to hear from you. So please call in. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to mention, too, while I'm remembering doing commercial announcements, if you're enjoying this, if you think this is a good podcast, you know, share it. Put it on your social media, your favorite social media channel, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, you know, whatever you use. You know, let people know if you're enjoying this, because we want to spread the word and get more people involved in getting their daily dose of happy and spreading positive entertainment rather than negative entertainment, as so much of the entertainment out there really is these days. So help spread the love, so to speak. So end of commercial announcement.
So body image during the holidays. This is the thing that contributes people's holiday behavior and habits of celebrating. It probably is what contributes to the rush to the gym on January, the first week of January. And then we always hear that those numbers calm way down after we get into the first month or so of the year. The gym memberships drop off, people stop going. And so how do you think that we change that sort of curve of behavior with law of attraction?
Oh, I think you already have provided the example. I mean, you told the story about how, as a very little kid, not that you were intending to apply law of attraction, but it's still a great story. You just kept telling yourself, I don't really like sugar all that much. I just don't really want to eat that much of it. And you kept telling that story to yourself throughout your life until now. I mean, if you do have any at all, you have a little tiny scoop of ice cream, and that's about it. Well, the story that you've been telling yourself has been huge. So I would go back to what you said earlier in the program about how important the stories are that we tell each other and tell ourselves about ourselves, and use that same concept when it comes to how we're going to handle our intake of junk food and how we're going to handle what happens when we pass the junk food period and we go into January and we try to establish resolutions. Instead of trying to establish a resolution on one day, I guess that's what I'm saying, why not make it an ongoing resolution to keep telling ourselves the better story? Because that to me is the more effective resolution than, January 1st. Okay, my resolution this year is to take off 10 pounds, and then you're done. No, it doesn't work.
Right. No, I think that there are so many examples of how we tell a story and the stories that we tell about ourselves. I tell a story of something that happened with me interviewing someone who was considering hiring me as a coach.
Oh.
And very excited to hire me, and we were hopping on the phone, and the day that we had set our appointment for everything to start rolling and she was going to officially start working with me, that morning she got a surprise phone call where she got fired.
Oh my.
Or laid off, lost her job.
Right.
And it kind of blindsided her, and she came to the call saying, I feel so awful and I'm not going to be able to hire you. I don't have any income. I just lost my job. And she said, but I'm a survivor. So I'm okay. She said, I'm okay. Everything's going to work out. I'm a survivor. And she started telling me about things that had happened to her in her life. And truly, I wouldn't wish a tenth of the things that happened to her on anyone. I mean, she had really been through this long list of terrible tragedies in her life, and she said, but I'm a survivor. And it hit me that after 10 minutes of conversation, she'd probably said, I'm a survivor, 15 times.
Right.
And what hit me was that her identification with being a survivor was so strong that at this point, I don't think the universe could really show her anything but one more thing to survive.
Right.
It's like the universe is a big mirror, right? It's not that the universe has feelings and tries to do something nice for us. It's that we create it with whatever we're seeing. It's that reticular activation like we talked about yesterday.
Yeah.
And so that's all she could see. And so it just was a never-ending stream of things for her to survive. And I actually told her that in a very kind way. I said, let me tell you what I'm hearing. And she actually wrote me an email a couple of weeks later saying, wow, I think this is going to change my life. Like just recognizing the story of, but talking about food and talking about sweets. I raised two sons, and from the time they were very small, one of them was sort of like me, because just could care less. Like, a cake will sit in the house for a week, and I'll throw it away because nobody's eaten it. But and that's, if the one son was away doing awesome, but the other son was like, couldn't stop eating sweets, loved the sweet things. And what I wonder is how many times, I'm telling that story to you now. How many times did I tell that story when they were little in their hearing, and it just reinforced it? how many times did I, as mom, say, "Oh, this one loves sweets. You just can't get him to stop eating cake. He loves cake.
Oh, I see
He'll
what
eat
you
cake
mean.
all day." And this one doesn't really like it. He doesn't eat too many sweets. How many times? So,
In other words, your expectation helped lead to the disparity, so to speak.
well, I'm just saying that as we go through life, we're not the only ones. People pick up our story.
Yes.
And then they start reinforcing it, right?
Yes.
So, so if you and I were somewhere and there were, your wife was there and, a group of people and you're introducing me and we're all out to dinner, it might be, this is Cindie. She's the one that just eats the golf ball size ice cream, right? But just to say, those stories that we tell really get picked up by other people, and then because they love us, they will start reinforcing those stories. I remember someone saying one time that their mom used to bake them cookies when they were little, and that was one of the ways that the mother showed love to the daughter.
Sure.
That she would always bake her favorite cookies, and it was like a continuing problem for her in life with sweets and with weight. And she said one day she realized that she connected sweets and eating cookies, with a feeling of love, because that's one of the things that her mother would always do for her. And I can't remember where I read that or heard that. It was a speaker or a book, but I thought, okay, so there's more of that reinforcement. Everything's emotional. You're talking about emotional set points.
Yeah.
Everything we do in the service is always in the service of feeling better. And so whether we realize it or not, and until we find healthier ways to feel better, we fall back on the ways that have worked in the past to help us feel better. And it only might be momentary, but cookies taste good, and we feel better when we eat a cookie.
Well, here in the Northeast, we have a sizable Italian population, and when you live around so many Italians, you pick up on the culture that, they're Italian-American, obviously, but you still pick up on that Italian side of it. And a big part of being Italian is that food is love. I mean, you go to an Italian house for dinner, and it's just overwhelming how much food gets put out. It's just incredible. I mean, here at home, Louise and I, we'll have 2 or 3 dishes and relatively small amounts, and we're done. You go to an Italian house, and the entire table is loaded down with food. And that's just normal. That's just normal behavior. That's normal Italian behavior. And, you get a real sense for what you're talking about when you realize all that food is made because they have a generational appreciation for using the creation of food as a way of expressing, this is me caring for you, my children, or my spouse or whomever. Just this is the way I show you my love, and they do it constantly, and they love it. I mean, the smiles on their faces when the food comes out is clear. It's crystal clear.
Well, it's interesting because even we do that. I mean, we do that, and the holidays is a time that we do it in a big way, right? I mean, that is, people do holiday baking.
Right.
And then they'll bring you a cake or bring you, holiday cookies, Christmas cookies. It's like to show you that they love you. So I think we get this consistent dose of food as love, most of us anyway.
I think so. Yeah.
Our whole life. And so there is that emotional attachment. So it's like, okay, when we love ourselves, we can find and devise and discover other ways of showing love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I heard somebody say once, don't, it was kind of along the lines of dieting and exercising, and sometimes that cannot be healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we think we exercise because we want to be healthy, but some people go on an extreme tangent of diet and exercise that becomes unhealthy. And the little thing that I saw, the little meme someone had made, it said, don't diet and exercise because you hate your body. Diet and exercise because you love your body.
Good point. Very good
point. And so that's the thing, is that doing whatever we're doing, whether we're eating the cake or whether we're pushing the cake away, from an intention of love.
Yes. Very true. In fact,
Definitely, I've eaten a piece of cake with the intention of love.
oh
Because
yeah, I think we all have. Sure. That's
that's one
normal.
of the things I do. Like
Yeah.
if I'm going to, spoil myself a little bit, pamper myself a little bit, let myself have a a day, so to speak, of self-care. Yeah, there's going to be some chocolate involved.
Well, they do say chocolate covers all the food groups, so.
Okay, explain that to me. Chocolate
Oh,
covers all
it's
groups. How's
silliness.
that?
It comes from, I think it was I can't remember where it comes from, but the classic example is chocolate cake, because chocolate cake has egg in it, it has flour in it, it has milk in it, so therefore it covers all the food groups.
Got it. Okay. So somehow, if we really work the math right, we can convince ourselves that a chocolate cake is a salad. I just know it.
We are all statisticians manipulating the statistics to say what we want to say. But I was thinking about your friend who was telling herself that she was a survivor and was continuing to get opportunities to show that she was a survivor. And I'm sure you said something equivalent. Your story certainly indicates it. But I was just thinking, what if she changed the word survivor to thriver?
Right, exactly. I once taught a whole class on this, actually. It's like how to acknowledge and accept and even honor our experiences in the past that were difficult. So maybe someone that's had cancer and survived it, right? Because you hear that so much. Or someone who's been through a divorce, or whatever hard things in life we go through. How do we honor those and acknowledge them without identifying with that thing so much? And it's all in the language. Everything, which is what our story, right? So I can say, I'm a cancer survivor, or I can say, I fought cancer and I won and I'm thriving now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different energy in the language.
It's in the language, and it's also in the emotional attachment to the language. If you just express the language without having the emotional attachment, it doesn't do anything. But if you express it with the emotional attachment, it does loads, does huge amounts.
So I can say, I've been through, I have gone through a divorce before, and now I'm in a happy relationship, or now I'm ready to learn how to have a happy relationship. We all go through transitions where that's a thing that I really love with an affirmation, is that if an affirmation, like you just said, if it doesn't feel true, then it's not really going to do us any good.
Right.
So if we look in the mirror after eating all the holiday sweets and say, I have a slim, healthy body, but we're not believing it, it's just sounding like a lie to us. So what I like to say is, I'm in the process of, or I'm learning to. I'm in the process of creating a healthy body.
I like the way Joel Elston says it. He says, when you're trying to make a change like that, try to reach for a change that you believe in. Try not to make it something you don't believe in.
Exactly. That's why I like this. I'm in the process of.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's because now you're qualifying it just enough that you can start to feel like, okay, yeah, I can get there.
Yeah, and if you say I'm in the process, actually just saying you're in the process can be the beginning of the process.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm in the process of learning how to eat healthier.
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever it is. Instead of being attached to the language that says I'm still back there where I don't want to be.
I just had an interesting thought. You know how addicts who go through the 12-step program, they always describe themselves as recovering. They're never recovered, right? That part of the 12-step modality is that you're always recovering. And it occurs to me you have to use a different word, I guess, but you can kind of do the same thing with the storytelling we've been talking about here. Because you've been telling yourself the story all your life that you don't like sugar, as if you were a recovering sugar addict. Well, actually, it isn't so much that you're a recovering sugar addict, it's that you never were a sugar addict to begin with because you kept telling yourself that story.
Yeah, I have to say that's one languaging that I've always wanted to change. And I I had a friend that had gone through a 12-step program and had not had a drop of alcohol for 20 years and still said, well, once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. And I said, well, I don't believe that. I believe that you're a person that had an experience with alcohol and that you're not the same person anymore.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying that. I like that.
You know, I think that we need to be recovered. And whoever you are in this moment right now is who you can be. And if you haven't had, you know, if alcohol has been a problem for you and you've gone through a program and you haven't had a drink for 20 years, I mean, when are you willing to say that person of 20 years ago isn't you anymore? Scientifically, it actually isn't. You know, every cell in your body is different now.
That's true.
And so,
yeah. I forget what the time frame is. I know it's different for different kinds of cells, but certain cells, they basically replace themselves, you know, within a week. In other cases, it can take a few months, depending on what kind of cells they are. Some of them can take years, but for the most part, yeah. Oh, in terms of what our bodies are, they're completely different from what they were, say, 40 years ago. Completely different.
Yeah, I think the time frame I've always heard completely was 7. Like every 7 years, you're completely everything is completely, you know, changed.
Right.
And so, yeah. So I think that we create it with our story. That's why our story is so important, and the words we use so important. I'm a big fan of tweaking the language so that the words we use are more powerful and create a better story, which creates a better life experience.
And part of it is learning how to tell a story. I didn't realize until I got involved in this whole law of attraction thing just how difficult it is to truly tell a story if you aren't used to doing it. I mean, I actually had to get on the phone with my sister, who was a theater major, in order to go over the elements of storytelling, just so I could learn how to tell myself a story that actually sounded like a story and that you know, engaged my own attention, so to speak. Because there's an art to it. I mean, there are people who are really good storytellers, and there are other people who, you know, they try to tell a story and you practically fall asleep because they don't know how to do it.
Well, part of that is, you know, like you said, learning. It's the same with, I hear this with emotions, you know, with understanding that the wider and deeper our emotional vocabulary is, the more we'll be able to consciously create what we want and how we want to feel. But when we have a very small emotional vocabulary, we don't have a lot to go on. We get confused about how we're feeling because we can't express it. And so I'm always telling people, you know, to just expand your emotional vocabulary a little bit. It's hard to do at first.
It is.
To say, how am I feeling about this? And, well, I guess I'm feeling frustrated or sort of confused, or, you know, spending the time to figure out, yeah, this isn't just, I don't feel angry about this, it's something else, but I can't really put my finger on it. How do I feel? The more of a vocabulary you can develop emotionally, the better you'll be at being able to consciously choose your feelings.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would go a step further. I would go a step further and say that it's also more difficult, in my experience, to develop the positive side of the vocabulary. I find that, especially early on, I found it was a lot easier to find words that were on the negative side. But when I wanted to replace them with something on the positive side, I kept saying, there are no adjectives. Where are the adjectives? I can't find them.
No, that's a really good point. We'll talk sometime about that emotional. Well, we talked about the emotional scale, the Abraham Hicks scale,
right?
And I have a method. It's energy leadership, where there's 7 levels of energy, and those emotions all fall into those levels. And level 1 is victim energy, and level 2 is conflict. And level 1 and 2 energy are the predominant energies in the world. And what's interesting is that when you start talking about those levels, everyone can relate to those two. Everyone knows what it feels like.
The second one was conflict, but what was the first one?
Victim energy.
Oh, victim, right. Yeah, okay. Yeah, you're right. That dominates.
Where you're not, where you're just not at cause of anything.
Right.
You're always at effect. And so that's I always tell people always laugh when I say when you've been in that place where you're like, oh, this is terrible, this sucks, this is not going to get better, I don't know how to fix this. Everyone starts giggling because they're like, yeah, we've all been there before.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go up to the next level of conflict. We've all had conflict, and if we are someone who doesn't show conflict, we've had inner conflict.
Sure.
Right? But as you go up the level, it gets harder for people to find those words that fit those experiences. And so that's what you experience when you say, well, all those negative words, I could find those emotions, but reaching for a bigger vocabulary of positive emotions is harder.
So what are some of those higher levels after you get above victim and conflict? What are the higher energy levels?
Well, the third level is the level of responsibility.
Aha.
And that's the level where we say everybody's doing the best they can.
Okay.
And the fourth level is the level of compassion. That level is where it's about everyone else. So I sometimes refer to that as the mom level. And as you climb up the levels, the emotions change, the feelings change. And so this could be an hour conversation sometimes. So there's a lot to say about it. But
well, I was curious to know what they were, just because, like we've been saying, the adjectives get harder when you get to the more positive realms. So I was just curious to know what the more positive realms were called.
Right. As you go up, the interesting part is level 1 energy is I lose.
Yes.
Level 2 energy is you lose. Right.
Yes.
That's the complex. It's like,
right.
Oh, I'm coming for you. Right. Level 3 is I win, and level 4 is you win.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Level 5 is win-win. And that's where we don't want to go into any kind of a agreement with someone unless it's going to be a big win for both of us.
Okay.
And there's not a lot of people that operate there. The next level is everyone's always winning.
Ooh, I like this.
And the top level is there is no winning or losing.
I love it. That's great. Yeah, I can see also how adjectives start to disappear really quickly when you get to the higher levels, because we don't have much language, period, for any of that.
That's right. So it is an interesting, it's an interesting exercise and a powerful system.
That's interesting. The second to highest level is everyone always wins, and then the third, the final level, the top level is there is no winning.
Right, yeah, it's just an illusion. I kind of stick with we're always winning the game we're playing. And that goes back to our entire conversation today, talking about the stories we tell, talk about, allowing ourselves to eat a whole pile of sweets and then feel terrible afterwards. It's just we're always winning the game we're playing. And we get to choose how we want to feel and what our actions want to be. And we can help ourselves by remembering to just tell a better story.
Mm. This whole thing about winning is really interesting to me, because there are a lot of different areas you can talk about that. One area that I think about is I'm not as much of a sports fan as other men are, but I am a sports fan. There are certain sports I like to follow. I am a fan of UConn women's basketball and UConn men's basketball. I'm also a New York Yankee fan. But most of the other sports, pro football, no interest. Pro basketball, minimal interest, and only because I'm 6'8", so I'm supposed to be interested in that, right? Soccer, I can watch soccer. European football, I can watch that for about 5 minutes and then I fall asleep. So a lot of the sports really don't do a lot for me. Nevertheless, I do pay enough attention to my favorite teams to see what happens on the online forums and sports boards, where conversations take place about the latest trade or who beat who, or all this kind of stuff. And there's a phenomenon that happens so regularly, it just knocks me between the eyes every time I see it. And I see it every time. I see it every day that I look at one of those forums. And that phenomenon is this. If you have a team that has a poor winning record over a long period of time, invariably you will find that their fan base is extremely negative. And we would tend to think that, well, they lost all these times, so that's why the fan base is negative. But you also see it with winning teams, too. teams like I'm a Yankee fan, right? And there's this whole thing about you either love the Yankees or you hate the Yankees. There's no in between. And if you hate them, they're the evil empire and so forth. Even among the fans that love the Yankees, you would not be you would be amazed how often they trash their own team. And the same thing is true for like the New England Patriots, for the Golden State Warriors, all the big teams that do really well. They have this core fans that just trash their own team because the coach didn't make the move that they expected him to make, or they traded a player that they shouldn't have traded, or they didn't trade for another player that they should have traded for. This is like this endless litany of stuff. And on the days, this is the part that I'm getting to about the phenomenon I see. On the days when they have a poor result in a sporting contest, the dialogue leading up to that is dominated by people who are on the negative side, what I call the nega fans. And on the days when they tend to do well, the commentary leading up to that are dominated by people who are positive fans. I can't tell you how many times I see this. It's just, I would say it's true at least 90% of the time. So it'd be interesting to see.
You're saying that the reactions of or it's not reactions, because you're saying it's actually before the result.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So you'll see all of these fans that are more positive seem to be putting out a lot of positive energy before a win, and you see the fans that are tearing their team down seem to have more energy going out tearing the team down before a loss.
As an aggregate, it's not that there aren't any fans that are in the positive voicing when a team loses and vice versa, but it's the overall aggregate. What do you see more of? That's the thing. And I'm not a sports bettor at all, and that's a really big thing these days is betting on sports. But if I was, I would do a test just to see what happened. If you could somehow gauge what the fan base as a whole tends to be saying, is it more positive or more negative, and then bet accordingly on the team, I'll bet you that would produce a winning result.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And I, as a Yankee fan, I tend to chide other Yankee fans when they're getting into that really negative realm, saying, can't you say something positive about the team? I mean, there's a lot of good stuff going on. Here's some of the good stuff. And to always inevitably come back with, yeah, but this is happening, and that's happening, and this terrible thing is happening over here, and how stupid the GM was for doing. I mean, they just can't get off of it. It's crazy.
Well, they're stuck in their story.
They sure are. It's just fascinating to watch, I tell you.
It is fascinating. It is fascinating.
Yeah. And I'm going to continue to watch. I may even try it sometime. I mean, I'm not much of a betting man. I don't like to bet. Even with games of chance, I only play if I think I'm going to win. So, and if I have a track record to prove it. So first, it's like I'm a very good poker player, but I wouldn't play poker at all if I didn't have a winning record. I just wouldn't even do it. But one of these days I want to try that. Just with a small, pocket full of change amount of money, and just see what happens. Just see what happens, because I have a feeling that if you play that long enough, you produce a positive result in probably a pretty big way. Not that I'm advocating people. I don't want to tell listeners go out and try this. I'm not saying that at all. So do not try this at home, right?
But it makes sense if we believe that everything is energy. If we believe that. That energy is going out, and it has to go somewhere. It's going to have some kind of a result or an effect.
Yeah.
And the focus of that energy is the team.
Yep.
So that's fascinating.
I even believe that there have been times I've helped my favorite teams win championships, and that's a whole conversation by itself.
Well, I think it's right in there, it has to have an effect.
I think it does. I really do. We've got about a minute left before we leave everybody. We want to remind everyone, first of all, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. I mean, we're getting more and more subscribers, but we want everyone subscribed so that when new podcasts come down the line, they show up right on your smartphone. If you're on iPhone, If you're on iPhone, you can go to iTunes and subscribe to us there. You can also do it through your built-in podcast app on your iPhone. Just do a search in the app for LOA Today. We'll pop right up. If you're on an Android phone, same thing. Just go to Google Play and search on LOA Today. You'll find us there as well. So please do subscribe. And Cindie, before we leave, how can people reach you if they're looking for a little coaching?
They can find me online at cindiechavez.com. That's CINDIE CHAVEZ.com. Also, Cindie Chavez on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. Come find me.
Terrific. Cindie, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Walt.
We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.